So when patients have abdominal surgery, there's a period of time after the surgery when your intestines just don't work. And we've never had a solution to this problem. The initial product is basically to solve a problem called postoperative ileus. You know, funding is basically a relationship game, and so I didn't know anyone. And I tried to convince them, but they weren't convinced because who am I? Just some random doctor, right? And so they basically rejected me in the sense that I rejected my idea. You really have to trust in the unknown when you're an entrepreneur, and when you're a physician, because you're so risk averse, you trust in the known.
And once you believe in your project, then it's just up to you. Hi everyone, welcome to the podcast. In today's episodes, we have a very, very special guest. She has been in the industry for over 22 years. Woman in MedTech, leading today a very interesting project. Let's see what she's going to share with us today, some challenges, funding her company, and as well her experience in the MedTech world.
Oh, thank you, Tara. This is such a great opportunity to be in Malta and to talk to you, and I love to tell you some more of my story. So I'll let you lead the way.
Yes, definitely. So let's start talking about who is Dr. Swarna. So where you were born in India, but I know that you are living in Texas now. So what makes you make this big move?
So my story really starts with my parents. So, you know, my parents left India very bravely when I was just a little girl because my father was very dissatisfied with the graduate education he was receiving there. And he took a big step, moved his whole family, his wife and two little girls, one of them is me, to Boston, Massachusetts. He was enrolled in a PhD program there, and he's an engineer, and he finished that. And then I grew up, obviously, in Boston, and I loved it. And then I went to college in the Boston area. And then after that, I went to Minnesota to go to medical school and did my surgical training at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, which is a very famous place, and I had never been to Minnesota before, but it called my name and I just had to do it. That's a separate inspiring story of itself. My mom was not happy about that, but she grew to accept it. And then after that, I actually worked as a general surgeon in California. So I worked at Kaiser Permanente, which is also another well-known institution in the U.S. It's a first model of what we call managed care, where both Kaiser is both the insurance provider and the healthcare provider. And it was an interesting experience for me. I think as in any profession, the more places you have experiences, the better well-rounded you become. And I think that's certainly true in medicine and in surgery. And so, interestingly enough, that time at Kaiser was very pivotal to what I'm doing now. And I didn't realize it, of course, at the time. Whoever realizes what their journey is at the time it's happening, right? But so what happened was that when I first started at Kaiser, obviously I was working on building up my patient roster and everything. And the company called KCI Medical came to Kaiser with their first product that they were commercializing. It's a negative pressure wound therapy product. And so negative pressure wound therapy, has been on the market for 25 years and has revolutionized the way we heal ulcers or wounds of any kind. So that could be like sacral decubiti, people who lie around in nursing homes, or diabetics who have these ulcers on their ankles because they don't heal because of poor blood flow. Well, so this concept is basically, you put vacuum therapy on the wound, and it basically, increases the blood flow to the wound, and then it allows the wound to heal twice as fast. And so the company came to us, and the surgery department was picked to work with them because we do a lot of the wound care. And they said, we need some diabetic ulcers to, take care of. And I said, well, we don't have any of those, but we have a lot of surgical wounds. And so the lady, I taught her how, because it wasn't developed for that, how to expand into the surgical wound market. And she furiously took a lot of notes the entire time I was talking to her. I worked with the company nurse, Cindy, for 6 months. And then what happened was that I learned a lot, but then they also basically learned a lot, apparently, because a year later they came out with the abdominal surgical wound product. And so that let them, expand into a larger surgical wound market. They became a multi-billion-dollar company and exited for $6 billion to 3M in 2019. And that really led to my insight that led me to become an entrepreneur. But I'll stop there and we'll revisit that story in a minute.
Definitely. So you already mentioned a lot of interesting stories in between. So it's 22 years of career. What
right.
has been those challenges that, especially as a woman, a surgeon woman, you've faced?
Well, I mean, I think there's so many. I think, any profession that a woman tries to go into, which is predominantly with men, is not really set up for women to succeed. So I don't think it's really the men in the profession so much. It's just that the system is not set up for women, and it's a lot of different things. It includes things like not being accommodating for, having children. It's not accommodating for our stature. So in surgery, that was a big issue. I'm a shorter person with smaller hands, and the equipment was never set up for that. It includes things like, patients not even being able to, like, at first they were like, what, a woman who's a surgeon? So there's so many little things like that and big things along the way. It's just so many, and they're different for different professions, but 1,001 problems like that. And I think it's better today because more women are surgeons. I mean, when I started, it was only about 10% of women were surgeons, and now I think it's, in residency programs in the United States, it's 50%.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And you've been working with different hospitals as well, so those journeys, those experiences working with different hospitals.
Right. So they were great. I mean, I never really planned it that way, but so, I left my training at Mayo. I finished my 7 years. I did research twice along the way, which was fascinating and gives me a lot of insight in different things. And then I worked at Kaiser, and after a year and a half, or almost 2 years there, I think it was 2 years, I went and did a fellowship, so more training in colon and rectal surgery, which was ultimately my specialty. And I went to the University of Southern California in Los Angeles and did that. And that was very lucky that I happened to match there because, you could end up going anywhere in the country. And then after I did that, I worked for them for a year and a half. I went back and worked for Kaiser. And then ultimately, they didn't have the proper position for me. So I ended up taking a position in New York City. And it was an interesting journey. I wanted to be closer to my family. It was in Boston. And along the way, it was a very different type of hospital. It is what we call a safety net hospital. It's in the Bronx, which is the poorest borough of New York City. And the patients are really, very desperate. So in Los Angeles, I worked for the county hospital too. So Los Angeles County Hospital, sort of a public hospital, sort of like, government provided healthcare in a lot of places. But when you go to a safety net hospital, they take care of people who are basically, desperate, homeless, really sick. And the types of, problems you see are very different in different types of hospitals. And I think it develops your skill as a physician and a surgeon to work in different places. Plus, they had a residency program, and I had the opportunity to teach residents, which was really another dimension to the work I did. So it was a great experience. But, living in New York City is not easy. I think, it's a tough place to live. And after a couple of years, I said, I can't deal with this anymore. And then I got an opportunity to move to Texas and work at the Texas Medical Center, and that's how I ended up in Texas.
And definitely you mentioned a very important word, opportunity. So all of this was an opportunity to then get you with this idea of your company. So let's talk about your company. What's the name of your company and how did it actually start?
The name of my company is Noleus Technologies, and Noleus is really no ileus. And my company, the initial product is basically to solve a problem called postoperative ileus. So postoperative ileus is the medical term for intestinal paralysis that occurs after abdominal surgery. So when patients have abdominal surgery, there's a period of time after the surgery when your intestines just don't work. And we've never had a solution to this problem. So we get people out of the hospital very quickly after all kinds of procedures today. You have a baby, you go home the next day, you have heart catheterization, you're out the same day. But when we have abdominal surgery, people are in the hospital, 5 to 7 days, and we never really had a good idea why. Well, it's this problem where the intestines don't work because your intestines have to work so you can get an IV out of your arm. Otherwise, you need an IV constantly. And so this product that I am developing is an outgrowth of negative pressure therapy, the same wound care technology that I worked with so many years ago. And one of the things that I recognized was that it could be used to remove the excess fluid that accumulates after surgery. And in the process, it would jumpstart that bowel function and let patients eat and drink sooner and get out of the hospital sooner, saving the hospital's money and also, improving outcomes for patients. So it's a big insight and it's sort of a big jump, but on the other hand, it's sort of an outgrowth of many, many smaller insights over the years from clinical practice.
Definitely. So for how long has been the project? What's the stage of the project?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think I had this insight about 9 years ago. Wow. And what happened was about 9 years ago, what happened was I didn't really know what to do because I was a practicing surgeon. I was never really planned on being an entrepreneur. And I saw the insight and I went and actually talked to 𝐂𝐸-𝐲, the company, and told them what I saw, and they showed me data that was true, that every time they used their device, patients ate very quickly. But the problem was because they were all wound care specialists and dermatologists, they didn't understand that was valuable data. And I tried to convince them, but they weren't convinced because who am I? Just some random doctor, right? And so they basically rejected me in the sense that I rejected my idea. So I went home and I was convinced this was true because this is a very big problem for us who practice surgery. And so it's a funny story, but I was talking to a friend whose husband is a lawyer. She's a doctor too. And her husband stopped by and he said, well, you need to go see a patent lawyer. And I said, oh, okay. And I went and I said, how do you find those? And he said, oh, my best friend from college is one. So let me introduce you. And then I went and had an appointment with that guy. And that guy wasn't the right guy, but it was his partner, who actually is his sister, who's a very experienced MedTech IP attorney. And she was so experienced because she not only, was the usual overeducated IP attorney with a PhD law degree, and she had also, in addition to doing all of that, had worked in a big medical, medical practice as a general counsel. So she understood the clinical side of things, and she'd also worked as a tech transfer agent at the University of Texas. So she understood everything. And so she listened to my story for about 90 minutes, and she said it's the best idea she'd heard in 20 years. And I was like, really? And so she told me several things. She said, well, first, it's a real unmet clinical need. Second, it's based on technology that's already been approved, based technology by the FDA, so you'll have a better time with that. And then the third thing she said was that what did she say? I can't remember what she said now, but I think she said, that she thought that it would be well accepted because it was already a platform that the clinicians already understood. Yeah. And so it was a big step forward, but I didn't know what she was talking about at the time. I mean, I'll be totally honest. But at the same time, I really trusted her because she sounded like she really knew what she was talking about. And I said, well, what should I do? She said, oh, let's file a patent, and not what's called a provisional patent, and then let's go back and talk to the company. And so we did that, and then we talked to the company, and we talked to the general counsel, and we talked to the chief technical officer, and they were interested in what I had to say, but they listened very intently. I made them sign a non-disclosure agreement, of course. And then at the end of the hour, I said, well, what do you think? And the general counsel, the lawyer at the company, says, oh, your patent is too good to steal. And I think, who says that?
Wow.
I know, that's crazy, right? But then it turns out that, I was just like, I was like, that's terrible to say. And then I thought, oh, I have something worth stealing, right? When you have something worth stealing, that's like a big step, right?
Yeah.
So I thought, oh, that's good. I have something worth stealing. So then we came away from that, and I said to my lawyer, what do I do next? She said, oh, you need to make a prototype so you can show people. And I tried to make it myself, but I didn't have the right technology. And so we hired a little engineer, for a couple of $1,000, and they made a prototype. And then I walked around with my patent filing and my prototype, and I didn't know what else to do. And I tried to talk to, investors and other people, and people just said, oh, you need a business plan, but no one would help me. So finally, I think it was a year later, because I was still practicing surgery.
So all of this happened in 1 year?
Well, yeah, pretty much in about a year.
Wow.
Yeah, because, it was kind of a side project for me. Right.
Yes.
So,
however, it started quite fast because, you were pitching your idea, but someone got the idea straight away, and then
I
you got
think all of this
a big
happened in
push.
about 18 months, right?
Great,
And so
great.
then I walked around with my patent and my prototype, you know,
Mm-hmm.
so that's been 18 months to get the prototype. And then for a year I walked around with it, and then I was trying to figure out how to get a business plan. You know, people kept saying I need a business plan. And finally, I found out that Rice University, which is a, you know, major, very prestigious university in the Houston area, their business school had a small consulting group. The students did some consulting on the side. So I hired them to write me a business plan because I didn't have that skill set. Yes. And they wrote the business plan, but they got so excited about what they heard about the, you know, number of patients that could benefit and the cost savings to the hospital that they asked if they could take that project to the Rice Business Plan Competition, which is an international business plan competition that each university can send one team to. So they beat out 10 other teams to represent Rice. And then when they got to the business plan competition that year, they made it to the semifinals. So they didn't win, but they made it pretty far over, you know, about 45 other teams. And so that was a big deal. So then the judges and the investors asked the students, they said, who owns this? Because it was obviously not a bunch of business school kids. And so then they found me and they said, oh, you need to turn this into a company. And I said, oh, okay. Wow. And so I did that. And then at that point, you know, it was 2018. So it was from 2015 to 18, basically. Great. And then what happened at that point was that we turned it into a company, and then we started, I raised a little bit of money from my colleagues, and we started to, you know, develop a better prototype and then prove out that this works in animals. And so that was the beginning of everything. And we got accepted to the Texas Medical Center Accelerator. And at that point, you know, I looked for someone to run the company, a business person, because I was practicing as a surgeon. And for almost 2 years, I looked and I couldn't find anyone because no one would take the risk, you know, because it's in Houston. There's not a big ecosystem. It's not Silicon Valley. And plus, it was, to a lot of people, it's kind of I didn't realize at the time, but it was a very radical idea. Yeah. And so I basically, you know, in mid 2019, realized this was not going to happen. And I either had to let the idea die, the project die, or leave practice. And I really did a lot of soul searching, and I thought, well, I could help so many people if I did this, so I left practice. So that's the story of how I became an entrepreneur.
And it indeed was a lot of yes and no in the journey. And I want to hear what was that actually challenges when you were trying to get funds.
You know, funding is basically a relationship game. Yes. And so I didn't know anyone. So, you know, I mean, really knowing investors is very important. So I came from a field where basically I practiced medicine and I didn't have any contact with these people. So that's the first challenge. The second challenge is once you get to know people, they evaluate you on your potential. And, you know, I'm a first-time entrepreneur. I've never done this before. I don't have a business degree, so that's a check mark against me. And then, you know, they doubt that you really know what you're talking about. They're like, well, you might know about the problem, but we don't know if you know anything about the solution, like getting it to market and all that stuff. But, you know, I think one of the things is after you have a full career as a surgeon, you know, those 22 years, you realize that you can learn anything. And so I just was patient with myself, and I just have kept learning along the way, and it's really held me in good stead, I would say.
And once you believe in your project, then it's just up to you.
It's still not easy to raise money, and we're raising money right now. And, you know, if anyone's interested, let me know. I'll put a pitch out there right now. We're almost ready to go into human trials. And I think it's been quite the journey. You know, I think this will revolutionize the way we take care of patients because, you know, when patients can eat, two things happen. One, you leave the hospital sooner, which is fantastic. Not only for the hospital, but, you know, in a pandemic, who wants to be in a hospital with someone else, right? You want to leave. You don't want to be sitting next to someone who might have COVID or something else, bird flu or whatever, right? And then the second half of it is when you actually eat, you actually heal. So, you know, patients actually break down their proteins. They become catabolic when they have surgery. And until you actually eat and digest, you don't start healing and building protein and muscle, and you become anabolic. So that eating is critical to recovery. And abdominal surgery has a really high complication rate. 20% of patients have a complication of some kind after abdominal surgery. Wow. I mean, remember when Princess Kate had her abdominal surgery, they kept her in the hospital 2 weeks. And everyone was like, why 2 weeks? And I was like, well, it's a bad look for a princess to run back from Buckingham Palace to the hospital because she has a complication, right? So they wanted to make sure she didn't have a complication, so they kept her for a long time. Yeah, right.
So coming back to those challenges of finding someone who trusts on your idea, investors, you indeed need to know and to grow your network. And that was, I believe, one of the reasons why you were with us in MedTech World Malta actually last year, correct?
Right.
So tell us more about your experience. How did you find the whole ecosystem in Malta, especially?
Oh, yes. So that was a fantastic experience, and I really enjoyed it so much. But I got to MedTech World through Giovanni. So Giovanni Lorenzella is a friend of Dylan's, and he is a recruiter and now based in Houston. And I had met him long before he moved to Houston. So he was holding some, events. I think it was JP Morgan in 2024 and early. And then I went to his event, and then he told me he was coming to Houston. I just really liked him because he really seemed like he's a very good connector of people. And then he moved to Houston, and then we met another time, and then he asked me to serve on a panel in Houston. And then subsequent to that, he asked me to come to Malta. And so, as you see, I like to talk. And so it works out, right?
Great. So this is the second time you're visiting
Second time I'm visiting Malta.
How is it going so far, the experience in
it's fantastic. We're looking into an opportunity to possibly do clinical trials here in Malta. It would be a huge first, not only for Noleus, but really for the hospital, the surgical department in Mater Dei Hospital. So we'll see what happens there. I mean, it's early yet, but I don't want to promise and overpromise, but it's looking good. Yeah.
So I have to ask you, are we going to see you again in any of our road shows or even in MedTech Malta 2025?
Well, I definitely think MedTech Malta 2025, and I would love to support MedTech World in other road shows. The problem becomes, it's one of me and I have a company to run. And then, cost is always an issue too. Yes. So that's always the problems. You always have to balance time, money, and effort, right?
Indeed.
Yeah. I've been gone from home for, 2.5 weeks now between JPM and here. So, yeah.
Well, good luck in your project. And to close this amazing conversation today, I would like you to give some advices to people who's actually in your same position, entrepreneurs who are trying to pitch their idea, and they might be getting a lot of no's.
Yeah, that's a really great thing to end with. And I think I talk to a lot of physicians who have ideas, and I think the mindset of when you practice medicine is very different than being an entrepreneur. You really have to trust in the unknown when you're an entrepreneur, and when you're a physician, because you're so risk averse, you trust in the known. So I think when you have an idea, you have to really believe in it. But also for in MedTech, if you are a physician, you sometimes have the best ideas because you really know what needs to be solved. But the problem is it's hard for people to really step past their comfort zone. And I think that really is what you have to work on and push yourself to do. I mean, for some people like myself, it comes a little bit naturally, but I think a lot of people can develop that skill by recognizing that it needs to be done, right? So I think that's the biggest step I would recommend to people. I see a lot of people who come to me with ideas, but they don't know what to do. And then when I tell them, they get uncomfortable, right? So they it's difficult for them to just step past what's known because they worry a lot. And so you have to really step past your own comfort zone in order to do this. I mean, I didn't know anything about entrepreneurship when I started 5 years ago, but here I am.
Here you are in Malta.
Right.
And we really wish you the best in your journey. Hopefully you still connecting with stakeholders here in Malta, hopefully, and welcome to the future shows as well.
Such a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.